I think it was 5th grade, maybe 6th, I don't remember for sure, when the first assignment that we were given in English class was to write a short essay, a couple pages, on the topic, what I did over my summer vacation. I don't know if any of you ever had to write one of those. It wasn't a hard assignment, really. I suspect it was meant to kind of, ease us back into the groove of writing and that sort of thing. But it felt a little bit like it was rubbing it in, Remember all those things you did during vacation? Well, that's done. You're back in school. So, well, we're back too. And some of you have asked us how our sabbatical was and what we did over our summer vacation, if you will. And there's no short answer to that question. And certainly it was a great blessing. God used that time for us, and I'll be sharing some of that with you this morning, as well as on other occasions, I'm sure. Lynn and I were talking just about the other day about when our daughter Laura was little, and we lived in the country of Peru, and she went to school there, of course, and first to a little preschool and then to elementary school. And during the summers there, many of the schools had something that they called vacaciones útiles, which literally translated means useful vacations. They were summer classes that you could sign up for. They were meant to be fun and interesting, things like, I don't know, like art and craft kind of things, or maybe swimming lessons, or, a class on soccer skills or whatever. It was really kind of more like a day camp in a way. Useful vacations. Kind of a funny name, isn't it? I thought part of the point of vacation was that you weren't under any obligation to do anything useful, right? But having said that, there is no doubt that rest and a change of pace is good for us, isn't it? And even necessary, that it's useful in that sense. And while a sabbatical is not the same thing as a vacation, there is no doubt that it had a lot of positive outcomes, I think. And it was useful, if you want to put it that way. So what did we do on our sabbatical? Well, some of the time we traveled and we spent time with family. We were down in North Carolina and over in Kentucky and up in New England. In fact, when we arrived back last week, as we were pulling into the driveway, we were just about 40 miles short of having put 5,000 miles on our car. I know, yeah, right? 5,000 miles. And it felt like about every 10 miles we passed a Dollar General. In fact, I wish afterwards, I thought, why didn't we keep count? That would have been interesting. I mean, they're everywhere. They're like weeds. But anyway, we weren't really traveling quite as much as it sounds like we were from that figure that I gave you. Much of the time, we were at a cabin on a lake in upstate New York, where we were able to rest and to read and to pray. I read about 20 books while I was gone, and we spent time hiking and on the lake, and just kind of being refreshed and renewed and spending time with each other and with the Lord. I was saying to the elders the other night that one of my goals going into this was to come out of it with some healthy, sustainable habits and disciplines that will continue on and extend the results of the sabbatical into the days and weeks and months and years that follow. In other words, I don't want to just come back from this and go back to the same thing. Okay? There are lessons that have been learned and things that I want to incorporate into my life, not just for those 8 weeks of the sabbatical, but for the long term. Otherwise, it seems to me like it's kind of a waste in the long run. Like it was nice while it lasted, but that's all there is to it. No, it's my hope and desire and prayer that it will have a long-term impact on my life. As people have asked what we did on our sabbatical, I've realized that even more important for me than what I did was what I didn't do. Spending those weeks completely unplugged from all ministry responsibility turned out to be important thing for me. Not just because I felt more rested, but because it allowed me to be able to just focus on my walk with the Lord. In fact, I was saying to the elders that it was an opportunity to discover what was left when you took all those other things away. You know? And I say that because if we're honest, sometimes we can be so busy doing things, even good things, church things, things for God, that our relationship with God can actually take second place. Ironic, isn't it? But sometimes all of our activity can kind of hide or mask the reality of the shallowness of our spiritual life. And the sabbatical kind of peels all of that away. So, is there a way to keep this sabbatical thing and the lessons that I learned and the rest that I experienced and the disciplines that I established, is there a way to keep this going? And what about you? I know some of you have been sitting there thinking, man, I could use a sabbatical. I could really, which I have. Is there some way I could get in on this, Well, actually, the answer is yes to both of those questions. To how I can make the sabbatical last and to how you can also experience the benefit of a sabbatical. And the answer is in something that God keeps trying to give us, but that we keep ignoring. The Bible calls it a Sabbath. It's a weekly mini sabbatical, if I can put it that way, right? In fact, it's the same root word, as you'll notice, and they're both rooted really in the same concept. But the Sabbath, I think it's safe to say, is one of the most underused and underappreciated of the gifts that God has made available to his people. He gave it to us because he knows that we need it. But we keep thinking, don't we, that we can get along without it and that we don't really need it. So what did he do? He made it a commandment, right? Remember the 10 Commandments? What's the fourth commandment? Remember the Sabbath, keep it holy. But it didn't even really start there. Actually, the roots of the Sabbath are way back long before Mount Sinai and the 10 Commandments and any of that. Its roots are actually in creation. It was part of God's original design for his creation. If you go back to the story of creation in the book of Genesis, you'll see that God intended for there to be a rhythm and balance to life that we seem to have ignored in many cases, a cycle of activity and rest. Activity and rest. It says in Genesis that God worked for the 6 days of creation and then that he rested. Now, of course, it's not that he needed to rest, right? But it is part of his creation design for us. So long before it was mentioned in the law of Moses or the 10 Commandments, the Sabbath principle is built into the very fabric of creation. And listen, he did that for you. He designed this for you. That's why I say that we need to view the Sabbath as a gift to us. This is meant for you and for me, for our benefit and enjoyment. It's a part of God's blessing on our lives. Your creator, your designer, knows what you need. So he established it in creation. He commanded it in the 10 Commandments. And then throughout the Old Testament, he keeps bringing it up. I don't know if you've ever noticed that or not, but he keeps bringing it up. Why? Because his people didn't seem to understand what he was offering them in the Sabbath and why. And they didn't really take it seriously. And I think it's safe to say that the very same is true today, isn't it? In fact, I've noticed a curious thing. If I were to ask you if the 10 Commandments still apply in our day, in other words, if we should still live by them, I think most of you will say, well, yeah, sure. Clearly it is still God's expectation that we not murder, that we not steal, that we not commit adultery, that we not lie, right? Those moral laws have not gone away in spite of how often they're broken in our society. And I think it's safe to say that people who aren't believers would probably agree that the kind of behavior described in the Ten Commandments is good. It's what makes a good and just society. But if that's so, then that the Ten Commandments are still in force, if you will, why is it that so many people who would agree with that, who would affirm that, seem to argue by their words or by their behavior that this one commandment is somehow, in a different category and it doesn't really apply to us? I mean, isn't it odd that people who would never dream of purposely breaking the other commandments break this one without a second thought and without nary a twinge of guilt, right? And by the way, it's not my goal today to put a load of guilt on you about with regard to the Sabbath. What I do want to do is show you the blessings and benefits that come from what is really a gift from God to us. But why is this commandment any different from the rest? Is it? I strongly suspect, if we're honest, that many times we choose to question the validity of this commandment because it's inconvenient. Right? It gets in the way of our plans. It gets in the way of making more money. It gets in the way of our priorities. What it comes down to is that we don't really seem to think that God is really takes this Sabbath thing seriously. Certainly not like he does the other commandments, right? But what if he does? I mean, what if he meant for all of them to be? What if he takes this one just as seriously as the rest of them? That's kind of a scary thought, isn't it? Because it means we're all in trouble, right? So I don't want to leave us with the idea that there is this somehow this command that you better do this or you're going to be. I want us to understand today that the gift that God has given to us. And so let me briefly read what God has to say in one of those places where he brings it up again, where he says, look, I really want you to keep the Sabbath because whether you realize it or not, you need it. It's for your good. So Isaiah chapter 58. You can turn there if you like. It's on page 642 in the White Pew Bible there. Isaiah 58. I'm going to start reading with verse 11, I think, and then read down to the end of the chapter. Isaiah 58, 11 to 14. Here's what it says. And listen to the promises that he gives us. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You'll be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And he goes on and says, your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. How many of us experience brokenness in our lives, in our situation? And this sounds good too, doesn't it? But then he says this. If you'll keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath and from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight, and the Lord's holy day honorable, if you honor it by not going your own way or doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find joy in the Lord. And I'll cause you to ride in triumph on the heights of the land and to feast on the inheritance of your father Jacob, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. As we've said, the Sabbath principle is something that God has established for our good. It's a gift. And this is a big topic, and we don't really have time to really say all that there is to say about today, and we may come back to it again. But I hope you think of it today as a gift. God says, look, I'm not trying to punish you by making you set aside this day for a unique purpose. In fact, I'm trying to bless you. But we look at this thing called the Sabbath, and we look at it kind of suspiciously, like as if God were trying to limit my freedom somehow. when in fact he's trying to give you freedom from all the stress and the things that have you tied in knots. But I think that his purpose goes even beyond that. I think that the Sabbath is God saying to us, hey, can we spend a little time together? Remember back, some of you will remember a few years ago now, I don't remember what year it was exactly, but when we were studying the Ten Commandments, and we said that we could view the Ten Commandments as guidelines for how to love the Lord with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. You remember Jesus said that those two things really are a summary, if you will, of God's law. So the first 4 commandments, if you'll notice, focus on how we love God, and the last 6 are on how we love our neighbor. And I think it's helpful to view the Sabbath from that perspective. It's not about rules, it's about a relationship. And aren't those first 4 commandments exactly the sort of thing that we might expect someone who is in love with someone else to say? You say, well, I don't understand that. What do you mean? Well, think of it this way. Imagine a couple who are dating seriously. Maybe they're even talking about marriage. So this is not just a casual thing. This is a pretty serious relationship, okay? Which, by the way, is the kind of relationship that God wants to have with us, right? A relationship that's based on commitment and intimacy and a deep, abiding love. So think of this couple that you're imagining, and maybe you're thinking of your own relationship with your spouse. There are certain things that each of those persons in that relationship have a right to expect, right? So she may say to him, for example, look, if you're really serious about this relationship, then there are some certain basic non-negotiables that we need to agree on if this relationship is going to move forward. Number 1, I'm the only one, right? I'm not going to share you with anybody else. No playing the field. This is an exclusive relationship. Does she have a right to expect and demand that? Of course she does, right? Secondly, she may say, well, I want to feel like you care about getting to know the real me and who I am, not just some kind of imaginary me that you made up in your mind, you know. That's going to require some time and effort, right? But the rewards are worth it. And in the end, you end up with a meaningful relationship with a real person, not just kind of a cardboard cutout, you know. Thirdly, the person may say, if you really want this relationship to move forward and grow deeper, then you need to respect me, my name, my reputation, who I am. No respect, no relationship, right? And finally, if you say you really love me, then I expect you to show it by spending time with me, you know? Real time, not leftover time, not time where your attention is somewhere else, but real focused time that says to me, you are the most important thing in my life. There's nothing that I want more than to be with you. Right? Now, those 4 things are really non-negotiables for a serious relationship. Wouldn't you agree? And they should sound familiar because those are really the first 4 commandments in a nutshell. Isn't it? Go back and look at the 10 Commandments in Exodus chapter 20, and you'll see that it is. God saying, I love you deeply. I want you to love me the same way, with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. But if you are really serious about this relationship, there are some things that need to happen, some things we need to understand, some non-negotiables, right? This is to be an exclusive relationship. You'll have no other God before me, right? We are going to be committed to getting to know each other on a deep level, not trying to make the other person into the person that we want them to be or imagine them to be. There's no false images. The real thing. There's got to be respect. Don't be using my name in vain. And we're going to commit to carving out real time with each other. How about a Sabbath? That's the first 4 commandments, isn't it? So I guess my question for you is, do you have that kind of relationship with him, with God? Because if you do, and I hope you do, then that's going to impact how you think about this whole Sabbath thing. Now it's not some, rule that you're supposed to keep. Now it's an opportunity to invest time and attention to this all-important relationship that you have. Before we get married, you do the whole dating thing, right? When you go places and do things together and all of that. And the thing is, we want to be together, right? And obviously that's important, even after we get married. I mean, lots of books on marriage will tell you that it's good to set aside a regular date night or something like that once you're married. Why? Because we need time together. Our relationship needs uninterrupted, focused time together. Now, that's hard to do, though, isn't it? It is. Because we live in a crazy world and we tend to be very busy, and there's work, of course, and there's running the kids here and there, and there's sports events, and there's work around the house, whatever it might be. Our lives very quickly get filled up. And what's one of the first things to suffer? Quality time together as a couple. And the exact same thing happens with our relationship with the Lord, doesn't it? There is so much other stuff going on that if we don't prioritize, if we aren't intentional about setting aside time to give attention to our spiritual life and to our relationship with the Lord, it's not going to happen on its own. And that's why God said, look, I'll do it for you. Okay? I've set aside this day, this Sabbath, to be our special time together. And that means probably that some of that other stuff that usually fills our day or has our primary attention is going to need to take second place for that day. It's going to mean some reordering of our time and our priorities, or it's not really going to be that time together. And this is where we can so easily end up just making a bunch of rules then, right? That say, well, you can't do this and you can't do that on the Sabbath. Listen, that's not what this is about, right? We were talking just yesterday at the men's breakfast about how we have this tendency to always try and make everything into a formula, that says if I just do this or I just follow this formula, then I'll get the results that I'm looking for, or make God will be happy or whatever. No, keep in mind the Sabbath is all about relationship. It's not about keeping a set of rules. It's about relationship. So what you do or not on the Sabbath, what's that going to be? Well, we focus on the relationship, right? On spending time together, on experiencing the rest and the renewal and the other things that he offers in the Sabbath. But we still find ourselves saying, yeah, but what does that look like, practically speaking? How do I do Sabbath then? Well, maybe we'll come back to that and talk some more on another occasion about how we can structure that day, perhaps, so that everything that God designed it to be for our good and for our blessing and our joy and our delight is our experience. Because let's be honest, this runs against our culture and our own tendencies, doesn't it? On my sabbatical, as I mentioned, I was completely unplugged from so many of the things that normally fill my day in my role as a pastor. And as a result, I was forced to ask myself, what is there in my life? What am I doing that nurtures my spirit and my relationship with God, not just fulfills my ministry responsibilities? Yeah. And honestly, I'm still trying to figure out what a Sabbath should look like for me personally, because for me as a pastor, Sunday may not be exactly the best day for me to practice the Sabbath, because it's not really a day off, if you understand what I'm saying. I mean, at least not entirely. Some of the elements of a good and healthy Sabbath are there, like worship and time in the Word, but other things, well, let's just say that there are things that make it hard for me to fully enter into Sabbath on a Sunday. But Lynn and I, as we've come out of this sabbatical, have been talking about what a true Sabbath would look like for us, because we've come out of this sabbatical recognizing the importance of establishing that as a regular discipline, of being serious about practicing the Sabbath, and we're committed to making that a reality in our own lives. But I think that this is where it begins, with our saying to the Lord, I love you. And I really just want to spend time with you. I want to go deeper in this relationship. I want to know you more. You see, we can get hung up on all the logistics, and that's what often happens, isn't it? But I think that Sabbath is really more an attitude of the heart than it is a way of arranging our schedule or planning our day. You know what I think? I suspect that many of us don't practice a true Sabbath because we're afraid to. Oh, sure. I mean, we complain about how busy we are and how nice it would be to have some time off and all of that kind of thing. But the truth is that many of us are afraid to stop because we're afraid of what we will see inside if we slow down. We're afraid that stopping will reveal the depth of our emptiness. And so we cover it up with continual activity. While we were in New England a few weeks ago, we stayed one night with my niece, Amy, and her family. They live in Vermont, just a few miles from the Canadian border. He works for the forestry. But they were showing us around their house, which is a really neat house, really old. Parts of it were built way back in the mid-1800s, and they've been remodeling it little by little, which has turned out to be a really big job. So there's this big hand-hewn beam from the 1800s that they were showing us that runs through the original part of the house. Oh, it's got to be at least 9 by 9, maybe as much as 12 by 12, big thing. And last year they were residing part of the house, and in the process they uncovered part of that beam, and to their amazement and dismay, it blew away. I'm not kidding. It turned to powder. Termites, I don't know what it was, but it literally blew. There was nothing there. It was gone. Now, thankfully, not all of the beam was that way. I mean, the parts of it were solid, but let me tell you, it was a scary moment to uncover that beam that you had always assumed was solid and was, in fact, holding up a part of your house, right? And to discover that there was really nothing there. It literally blew away. Could it be that there are parts of your spiritual life that are like that? We keep them covered up, with a veneer of activity, but the truth is that it's not as solid as it once was. There are lots of reasons, good reasons, biblical reasons, practical reasons that we could talk about this morning for practicing Sabbath. And there are lots of benefits, physically and emotionally and spiritually. But setting all of those aside for a moment, let me just ask you about the quality of your relationship with the Lord. I'm not talking about whether you're busy or not, or whether you're serving in some ministry or not. As we said, the truth is that all of our activity for the Lord can sometimes mask the shallowness of our walk with the Lord. And if your honest answer would be that when you take away all of that activity, that there's really nothing much there, I want to invite you to take a sabbatical this week and every week. That time that God has given you to carve out time to focus on your relationship with God, to spend time with Him. Many of us here would be familiar with the verse in Revelation 3:20, where God is speaking to His people. It's a verse that we often apply to evangelism as if He was talking to unbelievers, but really He's speaking to the believer. He's speaking to you if you know Him as your Savior. And He says, listen, I'm here knocking. I'm knocking. In other words, I'm trying to get your attention, because if you'll respond and open the door to me, He says, I'll come in. We'll eat together. It's a picture really of relationship, of God saying, look, I just want to spend time with you. Quality time. I want to know that I have your undivided attention. I'm not trying to sign you up to do something, I just want to be with you. And And you don't have to clean up the house before you let me in, as if I was a guest or something. You say you're a Christian. You say we have this relationship. So how come I'm out here knocking? Sabbath is God's invitation to open the door to Him, to spend time with Him. And you know what? If you'll do that, you may be surprised at how your relationship grows as you do that. So yeah, Sabbath is good for you for a whole host of reasons. Rest for your body and soul and spirit, and a recalibration, if you will, of priorities, a whole lot of other things. But today I want to bring it down to one simple thing, that there is a deepening of our walk with God that comes through the gift of Sabbath. A deepening that God Himself longs for, but that we as His people have too often ignored. And this morning I want to invite you to respond by simply saying yes to the Lord, by choosing not to ignore Him, but to instead enter into that deeper relationship with Him. Today we're going to do something a little bit different as we close. Instead of singing a song together, we're going to listen to a song that you may or you may not know. It doesn't really matter. But I want you to listen to the words and to allow them to be the expression of your own heart as you hear them. They're directed to the Lord. If you want to sing them, you're certainly welcome to. But whether you sing them or just listen to them, make them your prayer. The words will be on the screen, but maybe you're just going to want to close your eyes and allow them to kind of sink down deep into your soul. And if there are some of you who feel that you need to express your response to the Lord and to seal a commitment with Him this morning by coming here to the front to pray, you feel the freedom to do that as well. Let's pray. Lord, you are here in this place. And you take great pleasure in spending this time with your people, with each one of us. Would you give us a hunger and a thirst for more of you? And may we experience those sweet moments in which we feel your presence with us. Draw us close to you. Clear away those things that may be a hindrance to an ever deepening walk with you. Meet us here in these moments, we pray. In Jesus' name.